Welcome to our 12 o'clock panel called Sustainability, the Future of Sustainability in the Event Industry and of Networking Aspects in Europe. Now, sustainability has been an important attender for a long time, no matter if it's in a private environment or in a business context. Now, currently all of us experience, kind of an overstimulation of events, so that we are going to discuss how the meaning and alignment of sustainability will change for the events industry and the way we network in the future. We have a lot of questions to be answered. Will the change concern every part of sustainability, like economically, ecologically, and socially? Above all, which consequences will these changes have for the European events industry and the networking activities in general? And here with me remotely this morning to answer all these questions, please welcome Management Board Member at the EVVC, CSR, and Head of Department at DBU Center for Environmental Communication, Professor Markus Große, Ophoff. Secretary General at European Music Council, Ruth Jakobi, and CSR Manager at RAI Amsterdam and Chair of the UFI, the UFI Sustainable Development Working Group, Stephanie Mathas. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you. I see you on the screen and I see you in front of me. Great to have you here. And for this discussion as well, we are offering a Q&A session. So everybody who's watching us live in the live stream, right below the video window, we have a chat window. You can send us secret messages. Nobody else will see them. They'll be transmitted to my team and they will have them here on my iPad and I can ask them to our panelists this morning. So, biggest question maybe to start off with, which major changes, well, in regards of sustainability are coming to the event industry? And, well, I think Markus can answer the first question.
Well,
phone call.
So,
this is
yeah, that was a bad start, really. So I think one of the main changes is that we have big change really in the environmental topics. We have the Paris Agreement, we have the target to reach the 1.5 degree target or the 2 degree target. Everyone knows that that needs a very fast and a very big change in sustainability. We also have big changes in biodiversity. The scientists are speaking about the 6th extinction where we are just in. We have the youth who is telling us a lot about that we need fast change, that is Fridays for Future, or that are groups like Extinction Rebellion. And all these changes have to go very fast, really. So we have to reach these targets at the latest until 2050 and probably quite a bit faster to reach the 1.5 degree target of the Paris Agreement. Science tells us that we have to reach this target until 2035 or 2040. So we will have a totally change in all industries. And my thesis is that this will apply also for the event industry overall. So I think we have to work on a zero emission event industry in the coming 10 to 20 years, which really means quite fast change. And I think we have to organize it, and we have also to think about the youth and their tasks they want to have. As I see it in the pandemic, as I see it in biodiversity, as I see it in climate change, all the problems my generation really produced are a burden for the young generation. And so that is also one part of the social parts of sustainability. And it's also connected with the pandemic. Scientists tell us that the pandemic is also connected with biodiversity and climate change. And there as well, we see that all the things that we are doing will give the young generation a quite big burden on the economic way. So I think we are in a century, or in the next 2 centuries, are centuries of a big global change towards sustainability, and I think it would be very good if we in the event industry are organizing this change.
Anything to add here? Which major changes in the event industry do you see? Ruth, do you hear me?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. Of course, maybe I can take it a little bit further compared to what Markus already said. I would not only look at environmental sustainability. I think sustainability has many, many more aspects that we need to look at. And of course, if we look at the music sector, we are currently in a situation that very often music doesn't take place, at least not in the way that it used to take place before the pandemic. If we look at the effects also that the COVID pandemic has had. So of course, it's great that we all don't travel anymore. That's great for our carbon emission, of course. But obviously, at least to me, obviously, this cannot be the solution that we say, okay, great, so we stop traveling and we don't meet anymore. And take it further, we don't experience live music anymore. So I think that is very important to look, as Markus had said, also at social aspects. I'm sure that not only for music, but also in other events, the physical meeting is very important, and that we look at different aspects, how we can combine these questions on sustainability.
Stephanie, what major changes do you see?
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree with Ruth that sustainability is not only the environmental part, it's definitely also the social challenges we face. And what I see actually is that in the past, the question was whether and when we had to do business sustainably. And now the question is no longer whether we should do business sustainably, but mainly how. So I think that's a development which is a very positive thing. Regarding the how, I think we need to change our business in a way of doing business aimed at creating shared value. I think that is a big change regarding doing business in the past. So it's about how can we do business not only for the business, but especially also for society as a whole. So what is our added value? I think that is something that is important and will become much more important in the future as well. So, and I think also what is important is when we talk about sustainability or CSR, or in Dutch, in the Netherlands, we also use a different word, which is a social responsible way of working. Because I think sustainability is not something that is a static fact. We are not in a static situation and we change it and then we are in a new static situation. I see sustainability is constantly evolving, and I see our industry is also working on different sustainable challenges. And I think it's a way of working we should focus on, not something that we are finished with in 2050, because then we create new, different other social challenges. So I think we should focus on how can we work in a way which is social responsible in the eyes also of society. So it will ask for a different way of organizing, and I think that will be the main focus now and in the future. How are we going to organize in a different way? I think that's the main priority at the moment.
Thank you, Stephanie. Well, Markus, at the beginning you mentioned that there are different parts of sustainability. Well, there are economical parts, ecological, social sustainability. Do you think that the changes we're facing, the changes we're approaching, will cover more parts than these three parts?
Yeah, if you look on definitions of sustainability, there are a lot of people who say that there is a fourth part, which is culture, really. And I'm very in favor of this kind of definition, that you look economic, social, ecologic, and culture as parts of sustainability. And I'm of the same opinion. We need real meetings in the future, and we need also the culture part to develop sustainability in the future. And we have to organize them, these meetings, in a way so that they get more sustainable all the time. So we are on the way, and we don't have the solution which we can start tomorrow. So it's very interesting way in the next 2 centuries, I think.
I have a question for Ruth and Marcus. How can a sustainable orientation positively influence the recovery of the events industry and networking activities after the pandemic? Ruth, maybe first.
Take that one and also react to what Marcus has said before. I think with the fourth pillar, you were referring to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Important in this debate, I would say, and to pick out maybe one other of those development goals, climate change is one. Another one is gender balance and power relations, for example. And of course, here we can see in the pandemic that the gap that is there, that already has been there before the pandemic, is growing even more dramatically, because care work, be it paid or be it unpaid, is even more taken care of by women, etc. So we have this whole debate also in that area. And also to get back to what has been said at the very beginning, the question about biodiversity. Yes, that's a very important topic, and I think it's also a very important topic in the music sector, because of course diversity is, at least that's our credo at the European Music Council. That's what makes us interesting. That's what makes the music sector really being alive. And of course, with the situation that we have right now, that to experience culture and to propose cultural activities is forbidden, can also affect this diversity in the music sector very much, and also have a great effect after the pandemic. And now I come to your question. This is a very tricky issue to talk in this context about positive recovery, because all these issues would need to be addressed. We need to make sure that as many players, or as many possible players that have been active in the music sector before the pandemic, are still there after the pandemic, which is going to be extremely difficult if small ensembles are not there anymore simply because they couldn't survive, if artists choose to retrain or to take other jobs because they can't make their living out of their main profession, which is being an artist, anymore because of the pandemic. So we need to look very carefully at opportunities, how these issues can be addressed. And I would like to mention one of the projects that the European Music Council is currently running. It started before the pandemic, and already then we said we need to look at how we can implement change. We all know we need change with regards to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, with regards to climate change and many other aspects. But how do we actually manage to implement this change? So we also need to look at models to really overcome burderies. Why we all know we need to change, but why don't we do it? Why do we not get there? And I think here the pandemic indeed can be a very positive momentum, a driver in that sense, because we have seen it is possible to have this meeting, for example, this conference online. So we have learned, we have been forced to learn much more quickly, to use more digital tools, to also let go our worries about going digital, etc. Just we need to be very careful, I think, to use this still as a tool and not as the only tool. But the pandemic has been a driver and forcing us to look into these possibilities, much more quickly than we probably would have done without the pandemic.
So Marcus, what do you think? How can a sustainable orientation influence the comeback of the event industry?
Yeah. I know a lot of people or venues who did quite a few of changing during the time everything was locked. So it was a good opportunity to make energy efficiency, say, change on the location or things like that. So I think that was an opportunity quite a few organizations took. I think also we learned that changes can occur quite fast. We also learned that it's not very easy to organize all this. I think that especially culture events and fairs, they will come very fast after the pandemic is stops, because all people are looking forward to go to the next concert or have networking at the next fair. It's perhaps a bit different in conferences and meetings. We see it here, and there are also aspects in it. So, for example, if you have your family at home and you don't have to travel 3 days to a conference from Germany to Paris, for example, then it's perhaps a bit better to combine it with your family tasks. So that may be an opportunity, and I think we should. I don't think that all the online events will be go back to zero after the pandemic. So we also have to think about what are benefits of online events, especially in conferences and meetings. And we, on the other hand, we have to think about how can we organize all the other events more sustainable in the future.
So Ruth, what does this mean for the music industry and the networking activities?
I prefer to talk about the music sector, because the music sector is much more than just the industry. We have chosen the word of sector because we include education, we include amateur music making, choral music, for example. So it's much broader than just the music industry in the sense of big festivals or paid orchestras or so. And of course, networking, that's our main task, or one of our main tasks, so to say, at the European Music Council. And it has become much more complicated. I mean, what we experience very clearly is that networking works very well with contacts that you have already established before in a personal meeting. I mean, to continue this networking and these networking activities also online. What is much more complicated is to start new contacts, to meet new people, to allow new people into your existing networks already. And when we can almost experience it daily at the European Music Council. I have already mentioned the project that we coordinate at the European Music Council. It's called Shift. There we knew all the project partners already beforehand. We had one physical meeting at the very beginning, and now all the rest is going online, and that works okay, I would say. We are also involved in another project, which is called Creative Shift, where the project partners did not meet before. They did not all know them on beforehand, and it works as well, but it's much, much more complicated to create a trust relation. The glass of wine in the evening when you meet physically is missing. And maybe just to comment on the trip to Paris, I totally see what you mean, Markus, and I also from time to time enjoy being more at home and less traveling. But also when you look at work-life balance and the separation between work and home, it can also be more complicated. And I have my 3 kids at home in homeschooling, and I just hope they will stand another half an hour and not jump and ask any questions about their maths homework for tomorrow, just to give you an example. So the change between a place where you work and a place where you have time with your family is also important sometimes, or can be important.
Yeah, and you pointed out networking, really difficult. If you hang up after our discussion, there's no more networking going on. So it is really difficult. So yeah, as all of you said, we need to be, networking in person. It's a completely different style of networking. And yes, which brings me to my 5th question actually here. Stephanie, how can we develop sustainability in the event sector or in the event industry?
it's such a big question, and there are so many ways actually to answer that question. So well, let's focus on the how. So I would say when we see sustainability or CSR or whatever you would like to call it, when we see it as a way of working, I think we should. Should focus on a way of working with a context-driven focus, which means every organization has its own context and has its own. We're not working in a bubble, so we are a part of a context, and we should try a more context-driven approach, which means a more outside-in approach. At the end, it's society who decides if a company is working in a social responsible manner. So I would say that we need a more outside-in approach, more interaction with our stakeholders to see where our company creates or our industry or a sector creates a negative impact. For whom is the negative impact a negative impact? And at the same time, in interaction with the stakeholders, find solutions to organize it in a different, more responsible way. And at the same time, I think we should also focus on what are the social needs around us and how can we actually use our business to increase the social value of the business for society. There are many ways to do so. I think COVID taught us so many things. Of course, it has a huge negative impact, for example, for the event industry, but at the same time, it showed us and learned us so many things. The fact that we are not in this alone, we are in this together. And for example, climate change will not take borders into account. So we have to work together. We are in this together. COVID learned us the value of physical meetings. COVID learned us the value of local production. There are so many things COVID learned us, the situation learned us. So I think we should really grab the chance now to make a difference, to reorganize in a more sustainable manner. And I think it will not happen from one day till the other, but I think we should focus on a way of working which is a constant way of working, constantly interacting with our stakeholders, be open for what the social needs are around us. I think that's very important in these times, and especially I think that's also something COVID learned us. You cannot plan what is going on from inside your company. You have to react on what is outside your company, what is happening in the context, and how can you reorganize your organization to be flexible and make sure that you are really helping society as a whole with your business.
Yeah, and I can admit that was kind of a big question to ask. How can you develop sustainability in the events industry? But I have another question to you, Stephanie. You mentioned at the beginning the fourth pillar in the Netherlands concerning or regarding working sustainable, and you said it's called the way to work sustainable. Could you explain what exactly this means?
Yeah, so most of the time I see a lot of companies approaching sustainability that it is something you can define on the inside of your company. I see a lot of policies where sustainability is defined, and I think when you define it, you will create a goal, and when you achieve the goal, you would feel like you're done. But at the same time, I feel like when you're talking about sustainability and what I said in the Netherlands we call it maatschappelijk verantwoord ondernemen, which means it's a social way. It's a social responsible way of working, because at the end society is the one who decide if the way you are working is responsible or not. So it's not something you can define on the inside. You can only find a way of working which is responsible in the perception of society, and the perception is changing all the time. I mean, a few decades ago, people were smoking inside the office, and the perception was that it was fine. Now, of course, I grew up in a world where that's not fine. So the perception is changing, the knowledge is changing, the solutions are changing, the challenges are changing. So it's much more about a way of working than it is something that we can define. And that I don't believe in 20 years we're done with sustainability. I think we have to find a way of working where we are consciously aware of where is our business possibly negative for the environment or for other social challenges or social groups, and how can we organize that in a different way to prevent the negative impact, and at the same time or if we cannot prevent it, minimize it. And at the same time, how can we organize our organization in a way that it maximizes or it increases the positive impact on society? I think that's something we have to do, and we have to keep on doing, and we have to find a way to build our organization on a base of a way of working which is more focused on creating shared value. So that's what I meant. Does that makes any sense to you, or?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I have actually another big question that I'm sending to all three of you, and maybe Marcus can start. Now, speaking about the European Green Deal, it is something really, really big. Now, just in numbers, the EU will be climate neutral by 2050. How can we achieve that? And how are we doing at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really ambitious goal because we have to change everything really, and we have lots of parts where it's not so easy to be climate neutral. We have to have all the heating with solar or wind energy. We have to have all the transportation without emissions, and all of these things also affect event industry. And we are part of it, really. It means catering. How do we organize catering? How do we have catering perhaps with less meat? How have we more regional catering and things like that? And I think we should also if you, and sometimes you think, oh, Green Deal, that's some big thing of the EU. It doesn't have to do anything with us, but I think it has to do a lot with the event industry, and we should try to be a part of the solution, really. And the starting point for me is not the big things. The starting points are small examples, really. We should show with some of the events that we can achieve a good sustainability, and then we should go one step further with the next events. And the good examples are perhaps the best starting point to get a way into sustainability. Another point can be certification. So we are working on a certificate where we connect certificates of the governments in Austria and Germany. In Austria, we already have the Austrian eco label for events, and we are developing a similar German eco label, which is called Blauer Engel or Blue Angel in Germany, and it will start probably in the next 2 years, and I think we can have a lot of benefits from these parts, and perhaps we can integrate it to other European countries to perhaps after a while have an European eco label for sustainable events.
I admit that was a big question as well, but Ruth or Stephanie, do you want to add your 2 cents?
I can maybe add a little. I think the European certification is a very good idea. No idea how legally this can be achieved, but still, I mean, the idea is very good. I would like to add communication to what Markus has been saying, because of course there are things that big events can do themselves as an event. Obviously, music festivals, for example, are very much in the same thinking, and there are many festivals that actually do start making these changes about catering, about waste, about whom to invite, etc. So all the points that Markus has mentioned. But obviously, there's also the question about reaching out to others. And here, I think, comes in the big importance, the relevance of arts and culture. If you imagine in a music festival, how many people are there in the audience? And if there was just the message, if it was very publicly visible that the catering is only vegetarian and for what reason it is like this, or that the cutlery is not one-off use, or is can be recycled, or whatever it might be. If the communication about this is very open and showing to other people this is how we are doing and this is why we do it, it can really change the mindset of generations. And I think this really is where arts and music come in to help with this communication and with awareness raising in the general society about the urgent needs that we have.
Thank you, Ruth. Stephanie, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with them, but I think what is important is that we ask more questions in finding solutions, ask more questions to our different stakeholders we meet. We have to work together, but we have to understand each other's needs, each other's worries, each other's challenges, to find solutions that will actually fit with all the different stakeholders. Because if they will not fit, they will not last. So I would say ask more questions. That will be and listen, of course. When you ask a question, listen to the answer as well. Listening is not something that is always as easy as it seems. So I would say ask more questions, and I totally agree about the open communication. Because it's all about interacting with each other, with different stakeholders, to find solutions that will actually fit, so that they will last. So that's something I would say.
Absolutely. And we can be glad that the event industry is not solely in charge or, responsible for reaching the European Green Deal, that others are in there as well. We will continue with our Q&A questions in a few moments. If you have any, please type them into the window, and we'll be back with the questions after the clip. And we are back with the questions from our audience. Thank you very much for sending them in. And we start with the first one, and it's a pretty tricky one. Will the commitment to sustainability will be negatively influenced by the demand for fast growth once the lockdown will be over? Will our need for a bigger, faster, greater events be influencing the sustainability? Ruth, you were nodding.
Well, I think this is a big danger indeed, and it takes up a point that I was mentioning before. in a, and not exactly, but in one way or the other. I think the risk is there that the need will be so strong that we all have, that we all can travel again, that we all can meet again, that we have physical events again, that we will forget about what we learned during the pandemic, or what we said before, that we also forget about what Stephanie has asked, that it's a process and that we need to work in a sustainable way, that we need to organize our work in a way that is relevant for society. I think the risk is there because the need now, the hunger to have these events again is so big. And I also see the risk of, and that goes into a similar direction, of market concentration. I have said it before, to forget about diversity, to forget about all those who did not survive this crisis. There will be, I mean, of course, there will be, there have already been many deaths. Now I speak about survival in the professional sense of within the music sector. So I think the risk is there, and this is something that we need to address, and where we will need to recall ourselves what has been there before and what we had learned during the pandemic.
So Marcus, do you think our craving for big events is endangering sustainability?
Yeah, I think there is a risk, really, but perhaps our session is now at the really right time to go in this direction. So be prepared and use the time in the pandemic to be better prepared than we were before. So I also had the experience in the last years that I were in contact with quite a few persons, and they told me, oh, we want to work on sustainability, but we don't have the time to think about the concepts. Perhaps some people have more time now to think about the concept, so that they are good prepared to start in a more sustainable way in the time of recovery.
Stephanie?
Yeah, well, I would say that, but of course I'm not there to the one that can forecast the future. But I probably we will go back to how it was and how we did things before COVID when we will restart again. But at the same time, we learned a lot. So I hope that there will be enough space to keep on working on and facilitating the development of sustainability. And to be honest, I see much more customers, much more exhibitors, much more organizers, much more also in the government, but at so many places I see so much more attention towards sustainability. Also now, still during the crisis, also clients or organizers who are planning to come in a few years or next year, they're all having the topic on the table, and they are still willing to work on that. And I see that the numbers are of organizers or exhibitors, and also the numbers of employees in our company who are actually willing to make a difference. It is still growing. So I definitely believe that it is still something that we will keep on working on because it's important. And I think COVID showed us how important it is to work on the social challenges we face. So I definitely believe that it will be part, and of course it will be challenging sometimes because of the commercial, the situation, because of all the money the industry has lost. So of course it will be challenging at some points, but I still believe it is something that is so important. And the question, if we have to work on it, and it will not be the question. The question is how. And I think we will still find enough answers to work in a different way also after COVID. So I totally believe that it will stay important.
And I actually think what Ruth said before, that if the communication about a sustainable event is properly thought through, people will be really accepting participating in sustainable events, and so even the big events can be sustainable and people will attend them. We continue with the next question. Do you think that the events industry is over-regulated or overburdened compared to other industry, for example transporting industry, construction industries, in terms of sustainable operations? Anyone? Who's first? Markus.
So my feeling is that we are not over-regulated. I think I don't feel a lot of problems about over-regulation. I think that we don't need a lot of regulation, perhaps, or hopefully we don't need it. I think we can do a lot of initiatives by ourselves, and I see a lot of creativity in the event industry. I see a lot of people who are working on sustainability. I think we are on a good way forward, really.
So not over-regulated. All right. Next question.
Industry.
Ruth, do you want to add something?
No, I'm just saying I cannot speak for the industry, for the events industry representing the music sector. So I thought I would skip that question.
All right. So are there any ISO standards that can distinguish a venue as sustainable? And how does a certification process work? Are there any ISO standards?
Yeah, there is an ISO about sustainable events. I'm not too happy about it because it's in a way that you really can only apply it for really big events. What we really need is a certification for a bunch of small events and for an organization which wants to develop into a sustainability event. So the ISO we have should perhaps develop in another way. And on this topic, perhaps the ISO is also a bit complicated in some way. So perhaps we need an easier way to get a certification on sustainable events. And that is also one of the goals where we are working on with German and Austrian environmental certification.
Next question from Michelle. Does the investment in sustainability pay off financially? And to what extent can companies in the event industry develop a competitive advantage? Oh, that's a big question as well. Anyone?
Well, I think there is not one answer to that question. It depends. So it depends on the social challenge. Of course, I mean, when you are working on saving energy or focusing on only using the energy you really need, of course you save money. So that's obvious. So I think it depends on the challenge. Of course, for some challenges you need to reorganize the way you are working. And it sometimes asks for an investment. But in the long term, of course, I think it will definitely pay off. But we should not look at value only from an economical perspective, but from a much broader perspective. The value for society is something we should take into account as well. So I think when we talk about prices or about value, we should not focus only on the economical part, but also on the on the societal part as well, and then it will pay off in different ways. So we had so many different examples of partnerships with, for example, social initiatives in our region, and it's not about money at all. It's only about sharing value with each other. So I think it will definitely pay off in some way, and at least in a way that we and our industry can keep on doing the things we believe is very important for society, which is organizing and facilitating events. We have to take the sustainability challenges into account, because it will make sure that we can keep on doing what we are doing for our next generations as well. So it will pay off definitely in some way.
So probably standards like ISO standards can help in order to have the same rules and regulations for everyone, so that not well, the more sustainable event organizers make less money, and people like spending and not being sustainable and well, blowing out CO2 emissions earn the most money. So maybe Marcus, ISO standards can help in order to have the same regulations for everyone, right?
Yeah, but we also have to think about, so a sustainable event doesn't have to be more expensive in the end. So, for example, if you have a very energy efficient event, you don't have to pay for the energy because you don't use so much. Or if you have a vegetarian catering, in most of the times, vegetables are not so expensive than meat. Perhaps there the problem is to find the caterer who is good in vegetarian catering. So I think that in the end, a sustainable event don't have to be more expensive than usual event. What costs money is really to organize the change. So if you have a not so sustainable event and you have to think and to change in another way, that you have to pay for the time, for the investment to change it. But after you changed it, I think there are a lot of events which are cheaper in the end than the not so sustainable events we had before. So I see a lot of opportunities. Certification may help, but to have a certification which really helps, then perhaps we get a problem of a lot of regulation, really.
Okay. Next question concerning transport. Now, transport is responsible for a large part of CO2 emissions that the industry causes. Are there any empirical values for climate neutral transports in the touring business, optimally without increasing the burden on the budget too much? Budget question again. And question to any of you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Transport is responsible for a large part of CO2 emissions that the industry causes. Are there any empirical values for climate neutral transports in the touring business, optimally without increasing the burden on the budget too much? Big question. Ruth.
Not on the transport exactly, but if we look a little bit further, again talking about the entire music sector, there's a lot of traveling involved, not only about the audience, but of course also about the musicians playing. And one very simple solution could be to organize tours, more concerts in one row, which is not always happening. I mean, sometimes an entire orchestra, which means almost a full plane. If you look at violoncellos that also have to have their own seat, etc. I mean, I don't want to go too much into detail. They fly for one single concert from Europe to Asia or to the US or where might it be. So one very simple solution might be to combine concerts in one area and then fly back home.
Marcus?
I don't have an example from the touring business, but we had a congress, a youth congress about biodiversity. So there were only people between 16 years and 25 years there, 200 people. The topic was environment, and we tried to organize the transport. Especially we did it not ourselves, so we started to prepare this conference with 10 young people, because we think they themselves know best how to organize a congress for young people. And the result was that we told all the people travel to the conference by train. With the German train company, we organized a special cheap and train ticket, which also where the trains are driving with regenerative power, and we for the transportation in the location. So the congress take place 6 days. The young people slept in the youth hostel, which is on the other side of the town. And so we organized all the transportation in the town Osnabrück, where my conference center is, by bicycle. So we organized 200 bicycles for all the people, and that was a lot of fun for the young people. They enjoyed it very much, and in the end this was also cheaper. So if we had to organize this transportation from the youth hostel to our conference center by buses, it would be a lot more expensive than the fee to rent these 200 bikes for the transportation. So that is a small example. It doesn't connect to touring, but is perhaps also interesting how to organize sustainable transport.
Yeah, so there are different approaches, and budget doesn't have to be increased by using these approaches. Final question. Despite a long search, I have not found an agency in my region that specializes in the organization of green events. So is it up to me as a client to brief my agency accordingly? Or is there any kind of checklist for green events that I can use for this? Any green events checklists that you know of?
I know one, but that is in German. That's from the German Environmental Agency. It's called, it's a brochure, Nachhaltige Event, and it says, I think 10 pages checklist at the end, which is very good and which covers all parts of sustainable events, so environmental and also social aspects of events. If the German Environmental Agency has a translation in English, but it's a very good checklist, really.
All right, perfect. So thank you very much, Markus. And of course, thank you, Ruth and Stephanie, for attending our BIZLounge today. Great to have had you here. Well, at least on the screen. All the best to you. Stay healthy, and hope to see you soon, maybe for next BIZLounge. I don't know, maybe even live here in Frankfurt. Thank you and goodbye.
Okay.
And
Bye.
we will be back with our next session in just a few moments at exactly 1 o'clock.